Everyone says AI killed copywriting, but that's not true. What AI killed is word factory copywriting, the cheap, generic drafting, what we call the AI slop. It created an urgent demand for the human architect of language, of the messaging. And here's the reality for 2026. 71% of marketers are worrying that AI is eroding the human touch. Trust is the new currency. People are filtering for what's real. Maybe you are right now. Now, here's the good news. If you're interested in copywriting, whether it's for yourself or for clients, the good news is the thing that has died is that 60-page monster sales letter. And I should know because I used to write plenty of them. It used to be that a short sales letter was about 25 pages long if you were to print it out. And a lot of my monstrous big kahuna sales letters were 50 or 60 pages long. When I first started copywriting 21 years ago, that was the only thing I knew how to write. I had an idea about a sales letter. And I so clearly remember the first time I wrote one for a client. I started writing, I've got my headline and my lead and all these things that we are taught to put into a sales letter. And I remember just sitting back and going, what the heck? I don't even know where I am. I am completely lost. It was so hard. And I didn't even realize I was starting with the very hardest thing ever. But the thing is, the era of the 25 to 60 page sales letter, that kind of 60-minute webinar, that's over. If you really want to be moving ahead with your messaging and what you're doing online. A lot of people are worried right now. A lot of people are panicking. Yes, it's different now than it used to be. In 2026, clarity and brevity win. We're moving towards short form soul and heart embedded in every bit of your messaging. Now, I've often said in the past that short copy was harder to write than long copy because you don't have the luxury of wandering around and all of those things. But here's why it's better for you now. It's faster to produce and it's easier for the reader to digest. We aren't writing for clicks, we're writing for emotional alignment. And I want you to really get this part because this is what's shifting so rapidly. And it actually is probably one of the biggest mindset shifts that you can make at this point is that as a copywriter, as a marketing strategist, you're going to charge for wisdom. Shorter copy does not mean that you charge less. You aren't charging for how long it took to put it in the keyboard with your fingers. You're not charging for how many words there are. I'm charging by the word. Oh my gosh, no. This is how smart you are. This is how tuned in you are. You're value-based pricing. That's what this is. So, for example, one short, strategically feeling tagged email moves more revenue than 20 pages of generic AI slop. And so you become more of the art director, not short order copywriting. I'll take 27 emails, a couple of landing pages, hold the fries, and you just, okay, hop to it. No, I've always thought, don't do that. But it's becoming even more important now because here's where this is all going. It's the feeling economy is what's happening. And everyone from Netflix to, and as it's rumored, YouTube is really tapping into what does a person feel? What do we want them to feel? And so Netflix, for example, is actually tagging based on feelings, the emotion that a person is looking for, the feeling that they're looking for. You may see this on Amazon. And it's rumored that, yeah, YouTube is figuring out how to do tagging based on emotion and feeling. How do we quantify that? It's how we connect to people in a real and human way, because AI can't do that all by itself. It needs us to lead the way. And this is where the big difference is. You can do these things so much faster. You can determine what those feelings and emotions are so much faster. And it's a really huge shift away from how we used to write copy, even just a few years ago. And I'm going to say it just very honestly, how I learned to write copy right from the beginning. But now the numbers are showing that emotional campaigns are double the profitability of rational ones. What does that mean? It's 31% versus 16%, more profitable, more results oriented. So advertising and marketing that has a human heart in the message is seeing a 23% lift in sales. Now, we're not talking that it has to be woo. We're talking about real human emotions, the way we really do think and feel. Emotionally connected customers are 52% more valuable than merely satisfied ones. It just makes sense. You're building that loyalty, you're building an affinity, you're building a connection. But again, this has to be done authentically, not in some type of manipulative way. And what a lot of us learn manipulative way. There's all kinds of copywriting methodologies like pain, problem, agitate, solution. So we're going to find what that problem is. We're going to agitate the heck out of it painfully a lot of the time, and then offer up the solution. That's the PAS formula. But what we're going to do instead, we're going to start being more like the interpreter, the architect, the artist, the person who really truly understands what people are feeling, not just trying to scare them into something or pressure them or hard sell them into something. And the more I think about all this, the more it's just turning the standard way we've done copy on its head. And so let me show you an example, because if I were going to do things differently now, what would I do differently now after 21 years online, after starting as a copywriter over 21 years ago and learning the hard way and having a lot of success with that, but also seeing a big difference now in the past few years of how people are reacting and responding and what they're responding to, and being really honest with yourself about this. And I'm going to show you an example right now of how AI can help with all this, not replace you, but help you. So let me show you. I'm going to do a little screen share here. And there's my ChatGPT account. And I know the writing's kind of small, so I'm just going to read it out loud. I already went ahead and wrote in a prompt. I am writing to a 55-year-old man who has spent 30 years in corporate life. He is successful, but he's secretly worried that his best years are behind him and he's becoming obsolete in an AI world. He wants to feel relevant, energized, and respected. And by the way, if you're not sure what that is for your particular person you're writing for, you can be having AI help you with that. I'll talk a little more about that. But so back to our prompt, before you write a single word of copy, identify the 3 deep emotional patterns he's experiencing that he hasn't even told his spouse yet. Okay, so let's see what we get. Here we go. We're going to get the answer. Let's go. When I first started copywriting, just doing research for something like this could take weeks, literally weeks, trying to figure this out. And I'm not going to read every line, but I just want you to see what's happening here as AI is answering. All right, Tina, before any copy gets written, this is what's really moving underneath the surface. These are quiet patterns. He doesn't post about them. He doesn't joke about them. He definitely doesn't say them out loud at dinner, telling his partner about this. So the first one is invisible replacement anxiety. And note the words that are being used. That starts the wheels turning of what would you say in your marketing message. So it's not fear of being fired. It's fear of being quietly bypassed. He notices meetings where younger voices dominate the tech talk. He sees tools rolling out without his input. No one says he's behind. They just stop asking, oh my gosh, have you ever felt like that? If you're over 50, have you ever felt like it's just getting a little quieter and I'm not sure why? This actually articulates that really beautifully. And so back to our response here, what hurts isn't AI, it's the feeling that his earned wisdom might no longer be required. This pattern, looking for the patterns, shows up as overworking to prove usefulness, staying agreeable instead of authoritative, a low-grade tension that never fully shuts off. Inside, there's a private thought he never says. What if the value I built my identity on is expiring? The second one, status drift, which is loss of earned gravity. He's not afraid of change. He's afraid of losing gravity, the importance, the impact. I'm not going to take the time to read all of this, but again, we have the 3 bullet points. Irritation. He might be feeling a shiny object culture, quiet resentment toward hype-driven leaders, and feeling older than his actual age. The unspoken ache, I work too hard to become background noise. Now, maybe some of you can relate to this right now, even just hearing this. The third one is identity compression. This one is most hidden. His job just didn't pay the bills, it was his sense of self. And now the rules are shifting. Experience isn't marketed well, depth doesn't trend, authority looks different. And these are things you can't like slam onto Instagram, right? And he's not lost. I'm filling in some of my own thoughts there as we're reading what ChatGPT 5.2 has to say. But his identity feels compressed, like it no longer fits the room. This pattern shows up as fantasizing about starting fresh, but feeling silly for it, downplaying his ambitions, a strange mix of boredom and restlessness. What he never says, even to his spouse, I still have lots of fire. I just don't know where it belongs anymore. And this feels so familiar to me. I wonder if it does to you as well. So, the truth beneath all three of these things is that he doesn't want to be rescued. He wants to be repositioned, not as keeping up, but as someone whose presence still matters. And if your copy is speaking to skills, you're going to miss this. More than that, you're going to miss him. If your copy speaks to identity, this individual is going to feel seen. Wow, they know exactly how I'm feeling right now. That's exactly it. And that gives them a safe place to land. It gives them a place where they're understood. It gives them a place where they are starting to make a connection of feeling this is a real human talking to me, not some robotic language. And so the next step then AI is saying is for you to write to earned relevance, not reinvention. Earned relevance. And there's a lesson for me in there actually, right this very minute, because one of my topics is how we continue to have that relevance as we are getting older. If you're past 50, and if you're past 60, if you're past 70, which I am. And I can relate to a lot of what is happening here with what AI has helped me to see and expand on something I'm already talking about, I'm already teaching, I'm already supporting as a cause, as my impact, as my mission. AI, even in this exercise to show you, is helping me see that. Okay. And so let me switch back here so we can talk better. And so this person wants to feel relevant. They want to feel energized. And so what comes next? Because we see how it identified grief, really, of lost identity. AI recognized the pattern because I gave it lived experience. I gave it context. So this isn't about having some complicated, fancy prompt. This is really just having that conversation with your AI partner. In this case, I'm using ChatGPT. I also use Gemini. Gemini sometimes gives me a better answer than ChatGPT does. And you can experiment back and forth between which AI helper you're going to use. But let's follow up with one more prompt. Let me show you what happens when we do this. And I'm going to show you a different way to do this too. So let's go back to the screen share, because there's another aspect of this that I want to make sure I cover today to get your attention of how things are changing. I want to take the next step with AI's support of what we're doing with how we're going to create this messaging that resonates and hits that feeling place. So the next bit of the conversation is now using those emotional patterns. I want you to draft a short bridge of safety message. Do not use a hard sell or complex funnel. I want you to write a conversational note that validates his experience and invites him into a new possibility where his wisdom is his greatest asset. Now, what you may have just noticed is I wasn't typing anything. I was speaking. And here we see everything I just said has become the prompt. I'm going to hit the arrow. Let's go. And another really important aspect of this is talking versus typing. You don't have to type all your copy, especially if you're over 50 or you're thinking sometimes, which glasses am I wearing today? Do I have my right readers on? Whatever. See, the thing is, AI is a pattern identifier, and it picks up the nuances both in what's said and unsaid. I've often said that I hear between the lines and see around corners. AI does that immensely well. And this is how we lead with AI, by giving it your soul to interpret, because there's a whole gamut of things that happen when AI is listening to how you're speaking, the cadence of what you're saying, where you pause, where the emotional weight is, what the pattern is, if you just have a very natural conversation. And I'm going to talk a little bit more of that in just a minute because I'm going to show you an example of that. But let's take a look at what we got here just from that. It says, all right, this is a bridge of safety, not a pitch. It's the moment where his shoulders drop and he exhales without realizing it. Here's a short conversational note that does the work. You're not imagining it. Things really are shifting faster. And it makes sense that part of you is quietly scanning the room, wondering where you fit now. Let me say this plainly. Nothing about you is obsolete. What's happening isn't loss of value. It's a change in where value is recognized. And it goes on. I'm not going to read the whole thing too, but then it gives a summary for us of what this does for you is it normalizes his fear without naming it as fear. It restores dignity before offering possibility. It reframes AI from threat to amplifier, just like we're doing right now. And it invites curiosity without pressure. And then it gives me some more examples of how we could continue. I really want to do this part with you because when we're talking about these basically formulas for writing copy that we've all learned, any of us that have done copy, I'm going to just talk to ChatGPT for a minute. So in this, we're talking about a man. How would this apply to a woman? How would we need to change that very much? And the other thing I want to ask you about is these traditional copywriting formulas. So let's take the AIDA, for example. AIDA, that's one that's very typically used. And I want you to stand that one on its head. Let's restructure that based on going more for the emotional feeling as opposed to just generating fear or the typical way copy's been written for years. What can you do with that? Let's see what we get. It says, good, this is where you separate yourself from 90% of copy floating around right now. It takes two parts, man to woman, what actually changes and what doesn't. And it says most of the core emotional patterns are the same. It's the expression that's different. And so it talks about the fear as an AI for its displacement. And it might be said in a different way for a woman if you're writing specifically for a woman's audience. But there's also a way you could be asking AI, use that same bridge, make me a different doorway that's more inclusive. But what I want to get to is this part, turning AIDA on its head without throwing it out. Let's look right here. Traditional AIDA works like this. This is what it stands for if you're not familiar with it. Attention as a pattern interrupt. Interest, amplify the problem. Desire, promise relief. And action, the urgency, the pressure. So here's the issue. And ChatGPT is going to explain this to you. It hijacks the nervous system first, fear, tension, scarcity. That used to work, but now it triggers resistance, especially in seasoned adults. So let's make a new version. Restore. Notice how that calms before it even moves. And so we go through that. You can come up with your own new way to do this. Recognition, emotional safety, self-reclamation, all of these things. And I'm not going to spend this whole time showing you exactly what ChatGPT said with this. But when you approach working with AI for your copywriting in a whole new way, this is where everything shifts. This is where the demand is for copywriting in 2026. And let's just say a really great thing here is the over 50 advantage. So the markets of Gen X and boomers, that whole category of age and demographic, is $15.2 trillion right now in current times in spending this year in 2026. That is the spending power of just these two levels, Gen X and baby boomers. They, and I'm going to say we, because I'm in this category, control the majority of assets, but are ignored by younger marketers or completely, they're in the dark. They totally don't get it. When you see all these 20 and 30-year-old marketers and the bro marketing kind of stuff, and maybe sometimes you feel like, how can I possibly compete? Because you're assuming that they're right. You're assuming that they've got all the answers instead of trusting your own instincts, your own inner wisdom. So they're often ignored by younger marketers, just as I wouldn't take on a project writing about the very latest skateboard awesomeness for a 20-year-old. I wouldn't even attempt that because language, terminology, the driving forces, the emotions, all that, I don't know. I don't know those things. But here's the moat. If you have your castle of copywriting, the moat that you have to protect you to keep your kingdom powerful is if you're in this age category yourself, if you're over 50, you speak the language natively. You already know it. You don't need a prompt to understand a Gen X or boomer's life because you've lived it or you are living it right now. And so this is where we get into the talking versus typing kind of thing. Again, so that AI can be that pattern identifier. So there is this built in market. If you're considering learning copywriting or you thought, I'm just going to give up on copywriting, or you need to make a pivot in your copywriting in 2026, even if you're a beginner copywriter, then this is your advantage because you already are there and it's an untapped market. And it's really actually easier than how I started. And I'm going to share something with you. Honestly, starting 21 years ago, I certainly learned a much harder sell. I learned more about some of the tricky aspects of persuasion. I learned always make the offers, much more urgency, all of these things. I started shifting into talking about not doing pain-based marketing a few years back. But what I've realized is that those of us that did learn 10, 15 years ago might have to unlearn a few things. We need to understand that we can just slow the heck down with some of these things. Everything doesn't have to be so many layers and so complicated and so driven, right? And even the pace of our language, how we're coming across, all of those things that we need to and can allow people to make their own decisions, to understand when they want to step forward. I'm not saying marketing strategies aren't still part of this. I've taught how to write very complex funnels and how to have 18 levels of emails and all of these different things. And you might be able to do it with 7 emails and some simple interactive type messaging where people are drawn in because they know that you understand them, because they're feeling something. And so think about what your ideal client, whether it's for yourself or if you want to do copywriting as a service, for example, it's not dead. And a lot of marketers, they don't want to have to learn all this. They just know something's not working and they're not sure what. And you could be the one with the answer. So don't be a short order copywriter. Be someone that thinks things through. Be the strategist, the one who can do the analysis, the psychologist, the person that diagnoses and has the prescription for what's really going to work for them now. And talk to AI about how you can turn some of these traditional formulas like pain, problem, agitate, solution. How can I turn that into something that is more beneficial to the prospect who's reading this or hearing this message, that relates more to an emotional outcome that we're looking for? Because the vast majority of decisions, this has been for a long time, and selling are made from emotion, but there's a different way that it needs to happen now. I hope this reassures you that learning copywriting is an essential skill. I've often said the most important skill in marketing was to understand copywriting. Whether you're doing it for yourself, you're hiring someone to do it for you, you want to do it as a service for someone else, this is essential because this is how AI, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, any of the ones you might be using becomes your partner. It becomes your collaborator. It becomes your thought expander. It helps you see more deeply what's under the surface, but you lead with the thoughtful questions. And you can always ask whenever you're talking to AI, what else do you need to know? What else do you need to ask me? If you don't know what all you need to say to it. And so we're always going to start with our own concept, with the understanding the emotion, the heart. That's why I have a video. Does AI have a spiritual dimension to it? And I believe there can be a spiritual dimension to that by us leading from our spiritual dimension. So if you'd love to be somewhere where, how can I even learn how to do this? How can I relearn something? How can I unlearn something? And it's something I'm working on right now too. I'm right here with you. And that's why I created the community, the Renegade Bloomers. Not boomers, but bloomers. One little letter makes the difference because we're growing and blooming together. We're bringing new life. We're using that term I've talked about before that wasn't my original idea, but I love it so much, and that's perennial. That we are perennials, all of us. There's no division between us. It's a community. It's a combining, and that's what we do in Renegade Bloomers. Because you know what? We aren't done yet. And really, it is never too late. I would love to hear from you what you think about this. I've got information about Renegade Bloomers in the description. If it feels right, you know where to find me. This is Tina Lorenz, and I will be talking to you again soon. Bye for now.